Seaweed is a species of marine algae that grows in both fresh and salt water. It could be found along the shores, in oceans, lakes, and rivers all throughout the world. It's a sea vegetable and food eaten by birds, land mammals, and creatures of the sea. Most seaweed grows at depths of water where sunlight can be reached, as it uses photosynthesis to grow. Seaweed absorbs nutrients from the water and utilizes energy from the sun for fuel, changing carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. Seaweed can grow shallow on beach shores or rock pools to receive more sunlight when the ocean tide goes down, or as deep as 100 to 500 feet or deeper. Some seaweed can grow at depths of 1,000 feet underwater. Seaweed doesn't have a vascular system like terrestrial plants with the stem, leaves, and roots, but they have something similar, such as a stipe, that is a stem-like structure, blades that capture light and resemble leaves, a thallus that is the body of seaweed, and holdfasts that are similar to roots that attach to the ocean floor or rocky shores so they don't drift away with the ocean tide, and build ocean forests like kelp that help other marine life thrive in. Some seaweed also have air balloons that help them float to the surface of the ocean to receive sunlight. Seaweed can be as small as a microscopic single-celled phytoplankton, or it can be as large as a macroalgae and grow up to 100 feet like bull kelp. Some seaweed can even grow 200 feet in length. Seaweed can survive in both warm and cold water and can live up to a year or longer, and certain types of seaweed can live up to 7 to 15 years. Seaweed doesn't have seeds and reproduces sexually through spores and gametes, or asexually through fragmentation, where small parts of an algae break off and grow into a new one. The algae can be found in a variety of different colors of red, green, blue, pink, purple, white, black, brown, and orange. There are over 10,000 species of algae, most of them being seaweed, and are put into 3 categories of red, green, and brown algae. The color of seaweed is usually determined by its location, pigmentation, and wavelength of available light. Green algae, also known as phylum Chlorophyta, is considered the species from which terrestrial plants evolved from. Green algae uses the chlorophyll pigment A that is present in all seaweeds, and an accessory pigment of chlorophyll B. Chlorophyll A absorbs red light while B absorbs blue light. They both reflect green light together and are usually bright green in color. So they require good levels of light, and it's why they are found in shallow and open waters like rock pools. An example of green algae is sea lettuce. Red algae seaweeds, or phylum Rhodophyta, is the most diverse species of seaweed, and are found deepest underwater out of all 3 seaweeds, although some red seaweeds can grow shallow like Dulse and Nori. The red algae can survive with the least light because it has accessory pigments. Accessory pigments mask over chlorophyll pigments and allow red algae seaweed to photosynthesize at different depths underwater, using a wide range of spectrums of light rays. Red algae has the pigment of chlorophyll A, the accessory pigment phycobilin that contains phycoerythrin and phycocyanin. Phycoerythrin makes up the red color in red algae. It absorbs blue light and reflects red light. Phycocyanin absorbs orange and red light while reflecting blue light and is blue in color. Red algae also contains carotenoid pigments that typically absorb light in the violet to green light spectrum while reflecting orange, red, and yellow light, and make up those color pigments in red algae. Carotenoids can also turn brown in coloring due to the subset of xanthophylls. Chlorophyll, phycobilin, and carotenoids are the 3 main photosynthesis pigments in red algae seaweed, and is why they have a wide variety of colors, ranging from pink, white, red, brown, orange, green, yellow, blue, black, and purple. The color of red algae is determined by the different levels of pigments. If there is more chlorophyll in red algae seaweed, it will be green in color. If it has more of an accessory pigment like phycoerythrin, it will be red in color. Red algae is also an important part of creating marine coral reef. Brown algae, also known as phylum Ochrophyta or Phaeophyces, is the largest species in size compared to green and red algae, and has the most pigments of chlorophyll A, C, D, and fucoxanthin. That is part of the xanthophyll subset and absorbs blue, green, and yellow light rays, while reflecting brown light. The seaweed is brown because of its fucoxanthin. It can also be yellowish brown, green, or blue-green in color like kelp. Brown algae is also known as the branching algae because they have many tiny floats so they don't sink and can absorb as much light as possible. Brown seaweed is a free-floating tangled mass of weeds and prefers salty waters. Similar to green algae, it requires sunlight, but less of it. Brown seaweed can be found growing in deeper waters, but not as deep as red seaweed. Blue light waves penetrate deepest, and red pigments in red algae can absorb this light, along with the green wavelengths, while reflecting red light. This is why red seaweed can survive at deeper depths compared to brown and green seaweed. The pigments are what determine the color of seaweed. While many of these pigments absorb light waves, they all contribute into reflecting the specific color, either green, brown, or red. Seaweed is eaten and enjoyed by different cultures all throughout the world and is considered a superfood. The majority of seaweed around the world is distributed and imported from Asian countries like Japan, China, and Korea. Besides being an important part of providing food and shelter for marine life, seaweed is also important for terrestrial life too, providing about 90% of Earth's oxygen, as well as being an important food source for humans, containing important nutrients. Seaweed contains iodine and an amino acid tyrosine, both required for a healthy thyroid gland that is located in your neck. The thyroid gland's primary function is to receive signals from the pituitary gland to secrete hormones in the thyroid that affect most organs in the body, and regulates body functions like breathing, heart rate, body temperature, body weight, metabolism, the rate at which food is converted into energy, and how your body uses energy. It also supports reproduction, growth, and maturation. The daily recommended intake of iodine for adults 19 years and older is 150 micrograms for both male and female, 220 to 250 micrograms for pregnant women, and 290 micrograms for nursing women breastfeeding. Iodine recommendations for 14 to 18-year-olds is the same as 19-year-olds. 9 to 13-year-olds is 120 micrograms of iodine for male and female. 4 to 8-year-olds, 90 micrograms of iodine for male and female. The same for 1 to 3-year-olds. 7 to 12 months old, 130 micrograms of iodine for male and female, and from birth to 6 months, 110 micrograms of iodine for male and female. A safe upper limit of iodine for both adult male and female 19 years and older is 1,100 micrograms. Adolescents 14 to 18 years old, a safe upper limit of iodine is 900 micrograms for both male and female. For children 9 to 13 years old, a safe upper limit of iodine is 600 micrograms for male and female. Children 4 to 8 years old, a safe upper limit of iodine is 300 micrograms for male and female. Children 1 to 3 years old, 200 micrograms of iodine is a safe upper limit for male and female. And infants from birth to 12 months is not available. The iodine recommended intake for pregnant and nursing women is higher to reduce the risk of cretinism, a form of mental impairment that occurs in children whose mothers experience iodine deficiency during pregnancy, that can result with children suffering from stunted growth, deafness, and muteness. A goiter is the swelling of the neck or enlargement of the thyroid gland. It can be caused by either iodine toxicity or deficiency. Hyperthyroidism can occur from excessive amounts of iodine, usually from supplementation, that block the synthesis of thyroid hormones. Signs of hyperthyroidism include rapid weight loss from increased metabolism, irregular or rapid heartbeat, increased blood pressure, increased body temperature, sweating, and feelings of fatigue. As the thyroid attempts to produce hormones, it may enlarge. Hypothyroidism may occur from a low level of circulating thyroid hormones, resulting in symptoms of decreased body temperature, the inability to tolerate cold environmental temperatures, weight gain, fatigue, and sluggishness. Most of the world's iodine is concentrated in the ocean, and the iodine levels will vary in seaweed, but most seaweed has plenty. I experimented with 5 different types, starting with Dulse, which is a red algae seaweed harvested in the North Atlantic and Pacific Northwest. It can come in colors ranging from orange to purple. 1 gram serving of Dulse contains about 70 to 150 micrograms of iodine. 1 gram can be measured to the equivalent in weight of 1 paperclip or half of a dime. Next is Digitata Kelp, which is the Atlantic equivalent to Japanese kombu. It's a brown algae that retains its own nature throughout the seasons and aids the body in detoxing heavy metals, and it helps to protect the thyroid against radioactive iodine being released by nuclear radioactors. 1 gram of Digitata Kelp can have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 micrograms of iodine, or even 2,000 to 2,500 micrograms of iodine. Kelp is usually high in iodine, so make sure not to overdo it. Alaria is a brown algae that has approximately 17 species and grows off the North Atlantic Ocean. There's about 100 to 200 micrograms of iodine in Alaria. Moving on to Hijiki. It is a brown algae sea vegetable that grows off the coast of Japan, China, and Korea. Hijiki is considered one of the most versatile forms of seaweed because it dries quickly and maintains the majority of its nutrients. Hijiki has about 600 to 700 micrograms of iodine per gram. Hijiki comes close to hitting the upper limit of iodine for adults, so don't overdo this one either. Hijiki also contains inorganic arsenic, which can be toxic to the body in large amounts. It will take a whole lot of Hijiki for it to affect the body, but it's something you should eat every once in a while. Nori is a red seaweed that grows and is harvested off the coast of Japan, China, and Korea. It can also be brown, green, reddish orange, and purple in color. It is usually dried and pressed into thin-like papers and cut into rectangular sheets commonly used in sushi rolls, and has about 15 to 45 micrograms of iodine per gram. To reduce the iodine in seaweed, you can soak it in fresh water for 30 minutes, and afterwards remove the water. This will get rid of most of the iodine. You can also eat seaweed with goitrogens. These are foods that help reduce and counter excessive iodine levels in the body, making it perfect for people who indulge in seaweed. Asian cuisine mixes in goitrogens in with dishes and is why they eat excessive amounts of iodine without getting a swollen thyroid. Foods like bok choy and broccoli are great goitrogens. Besides having iodine, seaweed is packed with a wide variety of nutrients, like vitamin A, B, C, E, and K. Vitamin A is important for sperm production in men and fertilization in women. It is also important for bone growth and assisting bone development and healthy vision. Seaweed has 5 of the 8 vitamin B complex. B vitamins help our body create the energy we need from the foods we eat. B vitamins in seaweed are vitamin B1 or thiamine, that helps break down glucose for energy. Vitamin B2 or riboflavin, that helps support your metabolism and is important for the production of energy, breaking down carbohydrates and fats as well as helping fight oxidative damage. Vitamin B3 or niacin helps with DNA replication and repair, and the metabolism of fat, carbohydrates, and amino acids that the body uses for energy, keeping the nervous system, digestive system, skin, hair, and eyes healthy. It also removes toxic and harmful chemicals from the body. Vitamin B6 or pyridoxine is a coenzyme for an enzyme that breaks down stored glycogen to glucose, making it important for maintaining blood glucose during exercise. It also converts amino acids into glucose. Vitamin B12 or cobalamin is a bacteria found in soil and around grasses. Plants that grow on land don't need vitamin B12. Animals eat plants that have the bacteria on it, and it's why it's found in animal foods. Seaweed needs vitamin B12 and obtains it through a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria. Seaweed gains vitamin B12 from bacteria and gives it carbon in return. Vitamin B12 will vary in seaweed, but raw nori has the most. Cooking, drying, or even roasting nori can kill the cobalamin bacteria where it won't be as effective in the body, so it's best to eat it raw. The vitamin C in seaweed helps prevent scurvy that causes bleeding tissues, especially in the gums. It assists in the synthesis of collagen, that is a protein important for all connective tissue in the body, including the bones, teeth, skin, tendons, and blood vessels. It also helps with wound healing and preventing bruises. Vitamin E stabilizes free radicals and prevents them from destabilizing other molecules in your body, like membranes in our red blood cells, from oxidation, and protects the cells of our lungs, which are constantly exposed to oxygen. Vitamin K helps form blood clots for any tissue damage, tissue tears, or other injuries. It is also important for bone health, binding calcium to bones and other tissues. Seaweed also contains minerals of selenium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, chromium, copper, iron, and zinc. Selenium also helps the thyroid function and balances your hormones. Selenium is needed for the production of thyroxine or thyroid hormone. Magnesium is an important mineral that makes up the structure of bones. 50 to 60% of your body's magnesium is found in our bones, while the rest is located in our soft tissues. Potassium and sodium work together to maintain fluid balance and regulates the transmission of nerve impulses and muscle contraction. The sodium in seaweed, similar to potassium, helps to maintain fluid balance, the transmission of nerve impulses and muscle contraction, improving athletic performance. Sodium is important for endurance athletes or people who live an active lifestyle because it reduces muscle cramps and heat exhaustion. Water and salts like sodium are both lost through sweating. High amounts of sodium can increase blood pressure, but the potassium in seaweed counteracts sodium levels, naturally excreting sodium through urine. Chromium enhances the ability of insulin to transport glucose from the bloodstream into cells to be used for energy. It also helps to reduce the risk of diabetes. Copper is an important nutrient that works together with iron, helping the body form red blood cells. It also helps keep the blood vessels, nerves, immune system, bones, brain, and heart healthy. Iron helps transport oxygen throughout the body and muscles. Most of the iron in our body is found in red blood cells called hemoglobin and muscle cells called myoglobin. Hemoglobin is important for transferring oxygen in your blood from the lungs to the tissues. Myoglobin in muscle cells helps store oxygen in the muscles, making it important for movement, strength, growth, and producing new cells during post-exercise recovery. Women need more iron than men because of blood loss during menstruation. More iron is also needed for women pregnant or breastfeeding. And zinc. Zinc helps to transport oxygen to our cells and for the development and function of the immune system. Seaweed has also been known to have all essential amino acids. Amino acids are building blocks containing nitrogen molecules that combine to form proteins. Protein is important for building, repairing, and strengthening muscle tissues. Protein is also critical components of the bones, blood, and skin. It also functions in metabolism, immunity, fluid balance, and nutrient transport. Protein can even provide energy in certain circumstances. The fiber in seaweed is prebiotic fiber that supplies food and nutrients for probiotics. Prebiotics are non-digestible fibers, carbohydrates, and certain types of sugars that probiotic microorganisms feed on as it passes through the digestive system. They both operate together to improve and balance microflora in the gut, improving your colon, digestion, immune system, nutrient absorption, and overall health. All nutrients in seaweed will vary depending on the species, season, time of year, and location the seaweed is harvested at. Things to consider before purchasing seaweed is that it naturally absorbs toxins and pollutants like lead, arsenic, mercury, and cadmium that is found in the ocean and can be harmful to the body, so purchase organic. These heavy metals occur naturally around the world and seaweed can contain trace amounts. Pollutants can also leach out into the ocean as industrial byproducts that can be absorbed by seaweed. An example of this is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant incident that leaked nuclear radioactive material into the ocean after being hit by a tsunami that was caused by an earthquake off the coast of Japan that affected seafood and seaweed in that area. Also, don't overeat seaweed because of the iodine levels. If you are going to eat a lot of seaweed, eat them with goitrogens or soak it in water for 30 minutes and remove the water afterwards. You can also experiment with soaking it in boiling water as iodine will be released in the air as gas. Know the difference between micrograms, milligrams, and a gram. 1,000 micrograms equals 1 milligram, and 1,000 milligrams equals 1 gram. So don't get micrograms confused with a milligram or a gram, so you can stay within the daily iodine recommendations. If you are going to harvest seaweed, harvest in rural areas away from the city to reduce the exposure of pollutants to seaweed when harvesting. Check what species of seaweed grow in the area where you are going to harvest at so you know what to look for. Most seaweed is edible with a few species that are toxic. Stringy acid kelp releases sulfuric acid when damaged, destroying itself and nearby seaweeds. They are found in shallow intertidal zones and it's best to skip out on harvesting it. An algae bloom is a rapid increase or accumulation in the population of algae. They can occur in both freshwater and marine environments, from lakes to rivers, estuaries, bays, and in the sea. Algae blooms can be caused naturally or unnaturally when excessive amounts of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus enter the water, causing a rapid growth of algae. They enter the water by surface runoff from industrial agricultural fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, manure mixed with soil erosion, farm fields, pastures, feedlots, or concentrated animal feeding operations, discharges from septic tanks, municipal sewage treatment plants, emissions from combustion and burning of fossil fuels that build up at a rate that overfeeds the algae normally existing in the environment. Algae blooms can also be caused by the weather, such as winds that affect water currents, rain that causes runoff into the water, increases in environmental temperatures, and warming ocean waters. Algae blooms can vary in color depending on the photosynthetic pigment of the algae, being green, bluish green, yellow, brown, or red. Since algae blooms allow algae to grow at a rapid rate, they can create a layer in water the same color as their pigment that blocks sunlight from reaching other plants and seaweed in the water, and they can die because they cannot photosynthesize. Algae blooms use up a lot of oxygen in the water, and when they die, bacteria begin to decompose the remains, using up more oxygen. The decomposition causes the water to become depleted of oxygen. Larger life forms like fish suffocate and show up on the surface of the water and shores. This would be considered harmful algae blooms. Harmful algae blooms not only deplete oxygen in waters, but some species of algae can release toxins during blooms and as they decay that can be harmful to humans, creatures of the sea, birds, land mammals, sea plants, and seaweed. An example of this is the bright green blooms in freshwater of a species of microcystin blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, that releases toxins that causes nausea, headaches, vomiting, stomach cramps, diarrhea, fever, rashes, and respiratory issues in both humans and animals by either touch, inhalation, or consumption. Freshwater harmful algae blooms can also contaminate drinking water. Not all blue-green algae is toxic, and some species are edible like spirulina and chlorella. Harmful algae blooms that occur in seawaters are from dinoflagellates that are commonly known as red tides. Red tides are not to be confused with sargassum. Sargassum are algae blooms and are not toxic, they just leave an unpleasant odor. Always be aware of what's going on in the waters and environment while harvesting. Don't pick seaweed that is dead, rotting, decaying, naturally detached from its stipe, laying on the ground, or has been washed onto the beach shore, unless you are going to use it for fertilizer. Instead, harvest seaweed where it's growing at. Use scissors or small shears to cut some of the blades off from the stipe, but leave enough of the blades and stipe so the seaweed can continue growing for the next harvest. Some species like kelp can grow 0.5 meter per day, and they help to remove carbon from the atmosphere and reduce ocean acidity. So it's important not to completely take the whole plant of seaweed so it can continue growing. Bring a big bucket or place to store the seaweed when harvesting. An ice chest can also keep the seaweed fresh from becoming slimy. Just make sure the ice doesn't melt, or put the seaweed in plastic bags before adding it into the ice chest. Also, change up your harvesting area. This will allow the seaweed to recover faster after harvesting. The best time to harvest seaweed is when there is daylight, the tide is low, and after its reproduction phase, which varies from species to species. Check the tidal zone times online or get a tidal chart in the area you are going to harvest seaweed at. The tide rises and lowers twice per day in most places and is caused by the weather, time of year, and the gravitational pull of the moon, sun, and rotation of the earth. So you want to get to the shore when the tide is low, as most of the seaweed will be exposed. Keep an eye on the tide as you harvest seaweed. Tidal zone times are just predictions, and the tide can return sooner than expected. Set an alarm on your phone 2 hours before the tide is expected to return, and make sure your phone is fully charged. You might be submerged in water either 1 to 3 feet, so wear appropriate clothes and shoes that grip because the rocks can be slippery. Let someone know the location you are harvesting seaweed at, when you are going to harvest, and when you will return. You may want to go with a partner or friend to watch over each other while harvesting. Wearing a whistle is a great idea if you have to signal for assistance. For extra safety precautions, wearing a life jacket or having a first aid kit can come in handy. In California, you can harvest 10 pounds of seaweed wet weight for personal use per day all year long without a license. The types of sea plants and seaweed you are not allowed to harvest in California are eelgrass and surfgrass. Sea palm is prohibited to harvest for recreational use in California, but is allowed with a commercial license. Eelgrass and surfgrass are seagrasses that are considered to have evolved from algae in the sea to terrestrial plants, eventually transitioning back into the sea. There are around 72 species of seagrasses and belong to 4 families of Cymodoceraceae, Hydrocerataceae, Posidoniaceae, and Zosteraceae. They are part of the order of Alismatales in the class of monocotyledons. Both eelgrass and surfgrass come from the family of Zosteraceae. Seagrasses are flowering plants with similar features to terrestrial plants with a stem, leaves, roots, rhizome, and seeds, and reproduce sexually and asexually. They look like standard grass with long blade-like green leaves but grow submerged underwater or partially floating, in rocky, sandy, or muddy soil. Seagrass uses roots and rhizomes that extend into the sediment of the seafloor used to store and absorb nutrients, and anchor the plant so they can withstand waves. Seagrasses grow in shallow, salty, and brackish, semi-salty waters to receive energy from the sun through photosynthesis. They are mostly found in bays, estuaries, gulfs, lagoons, and coastal waters. Seagrasses live at depths underwater between 3 to 9 feet, and the deepest grow at 190 feet. Seagrass grows about half an inch to an inch wide and about half an inch to 20 inches in length depending on the species, with the longest being a species of eelgrass called Zostera caulacines that can grow 20 to 35 feet and are native to the shores of northeastern Asia, of Japan, China, Korea, and the Russian Far East Kuril Islands. Seagrasses like eelgrass and surfgrass create meadows underwater that resemble grasslands. These meadows clean the waters, provide oxygen to marine habitat, remove carbon from the atmosphere that holds twice as much carbon as rainforest, and provide a habitat for marine life, making them an important part of the ecosystem. The rhizomes and leaf bases of eelgrass were eaten fresh or dried into cakes for winter foods by Native Americans. Sea palm is a brown algae, also known by the natives as Kakgunu-chale. It is a species of kelp that is found along the western coast of North America and grows in the rocky mid-intertidal zones. Sea palm resembles a mini palm tree growing up to 60 centimeters tall with a thick, flexible stipe, small holdfast, and can have over 100 leaf-like blades. It is the only species of kelp that can survive standing unsupported in the air and spends most of its life cycle exposed to air. Sea palm only inhabits areas with strong waves and doesn't survive in calm waters. It receives intense waves that clash against the rocky shores and sometimes requires a boat to harvest. Even though sea palm is allowed to be harvested in California with a commercial license, it is banned to harvest in Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia due to overharvesting. Some areas may be protected and off limits from harvesting, so check the area where you harvest seaweed at to see if there are any rules or regulations. Once done harvesting seaweed, shake out any sand, shells, rocks, stones, small creatures, or loose debris off of the seaweed. You can do an additional rinse in seawater or switch it through fresh, clean water to remove anything on the seaweed. Hang the seaweed out to dry in the sun, similar to hanging laundry out to dry, and store it in glass jars. When it comes to preparing seaweed for cooking and eating, there are a variety of different ways to prepare it, depending on the type of seaweed you get. Roasted seaweed like nori can be eaten straight out the package. You can also purchase raw nori, add your own ingredients, and roast it yourself. Dried seaweeds can be rinsed in cold water and then soaked in a bowl of water for 5 to 15 minutes to be rehydrated and cooked for an additional 20 minutes. You may want to experiment with soaking the seaweed in cold or warm water. Keep the water that you soak the seaweed in because it can be used in soups or other dishes. If you soak the seaweed for too long, it may become bland and bitter, losing most of its flavor. You may or may not want this depending on the type of dish you are making. Raw seaweed, either bought or harvested, can be eaten right away, just rinse it. Seaweed goes well with soups, salads, smoothies, dips, and can even be a side dish as vegetables with meals. Seaweed is great for adding flavor, texture, and nutrients to any meal. Raw seaweed is best eaten fresh and can be stored in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 weeks. Dried seaweed can last a bit longer, up to 1 to 2 years, and even 3 years if stored properly, in airtight containers in a dark, cool place like a cabinet or pantry. The salt covering the seaweed helps to preserve it. This is Swane from Planet Swane signing out.